Good morning, everyone all over the world. We have many people. So just so good as the people are keep coming on. And I just want to say a huge welcome to people who are new. Some people have been on, and here we are together. So you might want to take a moment or two just to scroll through. Hello from Oakland, lots of chats from everyone around the country. And so I never see my assistant Jeanette. She's somewhere in the crowd. So anyway, she's there too. So many of you have been talking with her. Here she's making all this happen. Jeanette, are you there? You can unmute yourself for a moment and say hi.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me?
There you are. Yes. Yes, lovely Jeanette, who's all the way from Ecuador, making this happen. So we send our love. Yay. Thank you so much, Jeanette. Sometimes we have these technical problems right before with our music. We're like, we want our songs to play, but I think this is perfect. And so we'll go ahead and get started here. And again, just welcome back, everyone. I hope you got time to check out the video. The first and the second have went out. They'll go out on Fridays. We're going to be recording everything, as you know. And so you can get caught up if you've missed a class or you haven't been able to take a class. Just know that those recordings will happen. You'll get that. And let's just do a little bit of a recap about where we are. We're on class number 3. And the first class, we really did a lot where we were talking about Harriet Tubman. And we were talking about her life and the legacy. We were kind of setting up for the whole class series. And so I hope many of you have time to study, to watch the movie, to see more, to start researching. And it's so great. Everybody's been sending me stuff from all over the world, images of her, quotes. It just lets me know everyone's kind of researching that. So this is good. We want to be learning our history here as we go along. That's kind of some of the magic and the power of this whole thing. And so then last week we talked a lot about the prison of the mind, right? We talked about the programming that we're all inheriting, especially the illusion of white supremacy and the inferiority. We talked about these different aspects of what happens, right? And right now, many of us, we really are breaking open something here in a big way. There's definitely a movement around this, a movement of consciousness shifting into, beginning with Black Lives Matter, but this has been going on for hundreds of years, where, as we said last week and the week before, the past is here again. So many people are shocked watching things that are happening on TV and thinking, oh my God, aren't we done with this? No, we're not. Right. So as a healer, this is what you see is that old things that when they're not healed, they repeat. That's samsara. That's the Buddhist thing, like over and over, we're on the wheel. So we're learning here how to break that. And that's what the class is all about, really, is how do we heal this wound that we have? And how do we bring in the energy of Harriet Tubman? That's the main thing. So I'm going to be talking about that a lot. So last time, prison of the mind. So this week, I'm excited to really talk about this week and share some images with you and some stories. And I want to talk about the whole theme of allyship. And I'm going to introduce to you some characters that were helping with the Underground Railroad, because this story is about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, okay, which was 100 miles long. Many people don't know that the Underground Railroad operated for 75 years. They estimate 100,000 people left enslavement and moved to the north. And so this was a big, very organized system, up to 60 stops at times, and many of these people who were running the Underground Railroad were devout abolitionists And I want to share some of those stories because I think those stories are very important to tell. I think these are people who some were killed, some gave their whole life to this movement. And it's just inspiring for all of us to witness that. And also, we'll learn a little bit more about how the Underground Railroad functioned, how the Native Americans, which have not been, who have not been included in this history. Actually, now they're finding all this historical information about the Native American communities that were definitely helping with people escaping. And so, and we're here to really celebrate Harriet Tubman, right? And to bring in this energy. And as I keep telling the story, as I had this dream about it, and I want to tell you what a miracle. Now I laugh and I say, anything that happens, I'm like, well, it's Harriet. It's Harriet. She's here. And I really do feel that this spirit is with me. It's beautiful, powerful woman. And that's really what we all need right now is that power, that courage. Courage to stand up, courage to speak the truth, courage to even open to the truth. Right? Courage is what we're all needing right now. And so I'll tell you a funny story about that, and then we'll do some meditation. We're going to have a discussion. Also, Professor Arisika is here. She's going to talk also about allyship. Many of you enjoyed hearing from these amazing African-American women last week speaking. And so I've invited another Professor Arisika. Yes, she's going to be on doing a little bit of guidance and then sharing some more about this idea of the ally. And so to backtrack really quick about the story. So I had this visionary dream of Harriet, and that was just a month ago. And now my publisher from Hay House, so many people on this call are writers, healers, publisher, has been on the call. She might be on here right now. Hi, Patty. She's now, her and I are going to be writing a book. Well, I'll write the book about Harriet. So there's a book that has come out of this and maybe even potentially a Netflix special. So that just goes to show you Harriet's energy, right? The spirit of this woman wants to be out moving around, and you can call on her, right? You can call on our ancestors. This is my ancestor and your ancestor, right? This is the world's ancestor. And so there's something very powerful about just recognizing that. But I'm sure you all know because you're here, and that's a part of what you want to call into your life, and as we ground and understand more together. So I want to welcome you. I'm deep in this exploration, and I'm humbled, and I have much to learn. And so I always just bow down before and just kind of take in the learning that I am undergoing, the transformation that I'm undergoing. We are in another civil rights era. Make no mistake about it. And I have a feeling that things are going to get pretty rough here in the next few months, right? Because we're sort of in the darkest part of the night here, the most the entrenched stuckness, the illness. We're right at the door of it. We're opening the door. So there's a lot of joy in coming together, and this common, we're here to support each other. We're here to be here for each other. So I'm hoping that this community, we might even continue on Sundays, or I just have a class always, Harriet and the Underground Railroad, and I talk about many freedom fighters from all over the world, Brazilian, Ecuadorian tribes, people who have been on this railroad, right, underground, going to freedom. So it might be just our church every Sunday, and you can log on if you want. And we will move and dance, and I'll have speakers, and we'll pray. Because that's what we got to do, friends. We just got to keep praying and keep walking, and there's something about walking forward. We're moving away from something, right? We're healing something by our presence. So we give thanks on this Sunday morning to all the ancestors. I want to call them all in. Dr. King, Nelson Mandela, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, Buddhas from all directions, to ground and surround and protect this class and help us to embody that which is needed for the healing of all beings. So we will start there with our first meditation. But again, I want to invite people, if you want to sit in prayer, if you want to do something more active, you can. But there's also something very powerful about just the stillness of the sitting practice. So we will start with a 15-minute meditation, and then I'll talk for a little while, and then Arisika, and then we'll do a little bit of moving, and I'll play some songs, and then Arisika will play her or share her movement and give a little talk, and then we'll have Q&A. Okay, so that's how it's going to go. So we'll have a guided movement, and of course, the guided movement will be just walking. Right? There's something about walking right now. If you can't walk, that's okay. You can move your arms. That's okay if you're more stationary, but it's just imagine, even if you can't move your body, imagine your feet are just moving forward, right? That we're walking in the movement. So much of this history has been about walking, marching, and you could do that on a mental level. It doesn't have to be your body. Actually, you can do it imagining walking. So again, I just want to kind of scroll through because we have about 276 people on. Hello, everybody. I wish everyone could kind of squeeze on my page, just warm wishes. Lisa. And yes, hello. It's like I want to get back to the back page. Hi, everybody. So thank you for joining us in this conversation. I see you on the call, Miriam, Claudine, Catherine, Ali, Hopi. Okay, Briandi, yes. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to just let's start our 15-minute meditation here. And so remembering, it sounds like everyone has their microphone muted, which I appreciate and give thanks for that. And as we begin to close our eyes and just begin to drop into the body, and as you begin to feel your breath, let your eyes just close naturally. See if you can ground and root in your body. So as you feel your feet touching the floor, to feel your rootedness of your feet and maybe where you're sitting in a chair or the cushion, and feel the contact of the floor. Relaxing your neck and your shoulders. And see, with each breath in and out, you can soften the body a little bit, resting deeper in the body and the belly, feeling the rise and the fall of the breath in the belly. Find your breath, find your body. There you will find the present moment. Find your breath, find your body, and there you will find the present moment. Softening wherever you feel tension. If there's restlessness or boredom, be just open to that, the present moment. We open to the way things are. And then bringing your awareness up into the heart center, this offering metta, compassion practice, as we're all holding so much in the heart. We carry all of the sorrows and the joys of life in this heart. And we want our hearts to be strong, healthy, well. For the spiritual path is a path of the heart, following the heart, trusting these hearts of ours. And trusting and knowing that our lives are guided by a force of beauty and truth and goodness. that the universe is a just place, and the seeds that we plant will flower. The seeds of love, the seeds of compassion, the seeds of courage grow. They flower. And we take refuge in the teachings of the awakened ones, the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas. We take refuge in the Dharma, the truth of the liberated path, the teachings on the way home. We take refuge in compassion and truth and wisdom. We take refuge in generosity and care for fellow human beings. We take refuge in the truth of interconnectedness, that all beings are from a single source, a single web, connected throughout every cell, throughout all time, interdependent upon one another. We awaken together. The work that we do is for each other. And we hold that prayer in our hearts, that our hearts connect to all the hearts. We take refuge in the Dharma. We take refuge in the Sangha. We take refuge in the Buddhas. We take refuge in the Sangha because it is together that we rise. It is together that we walk forward. It is together that we will overcome greed, hatred, and delusion. It is together that we are strong. It is together with the spirits of this earth plane, all who have walked and died for truth and justice. We walk with you united in standing up for what is true, for standing up for love, for standing up for equality, for standing up for all that is just and good. And may this class be a blessing to our being, our spirit. May this class hold us with integrity and light. May we walk with the ancestors, find strength in our ancestors. From all lineages, from all parts of the world, we have all had awakened ancestors, and call them forth in this moment to bless us all, to lead us through this dark night. May we carry the lamps of truth and love for all beings, all times. We carry these for past hurts and pains. As we bring healing to this situation and this moment in time, we bring our awareness and our hearts together, united, that all wounds dissolve in compassion. And that is our prayer. That is why we gather. That is why we pray. All wounds dissolved, all debts paid, all karmas healed. We ask that of the spirit world. We ask that of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We ask that of those who have died for just causes. We ask for all to be healed in the heart of compassion. And with that, we will ring the bell. Okay, everybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to start talking a bit more about allies and this whole conversation about allyship. Okay, and so let's see if this works, because Janetti and I are new at Zoom. So as I've been researching, there's several people that I want to talk about. And so I'm going to take about 15 minutes and I'm going to show you the slides of the images of the people who were the biggest supporters of the Underground Railroad. Now, I want to say before I start, I'm showing images of most of the people I'm going to show images of, all of them are white. Now, there are many African Americans who supported the Underground Railroad's functioning. One of the most famous being Frederick Douglass, who many of you, you might know about Frederick Douglass. And I want to say a couple of things because he escaped from slavery 1838. His house was actually the last stop on the railroad many times. So he was very close to the Massachusetts border, very close. And Frederick Douglass, he was born in slavery. And as you know, he taught himself how to read and write as a slave. And then he escaped in 1838. And then he was settled in Massachusetts with the help of William Lloyd Garrison, and who I'm going to show you a picture of William Lloyd Garrison in a moment because he was one of the most helpful abolitionists, powerful ally, helped many people, and was dear friends with both Harriet and Frederick Douglass, felt deeply moved to support their cause, okay? And so as you know, and also Lloyd Garrison, he became an orator of the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, and he helped publish the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass and 2 other biographies for his newspaper, right? So he was helping get a lot of people who had escaped their voices out to tell their stories and helping them find their voices and things like that. And so, so as we know, Frederick Douglass, he ran the abolitionist newspaper, the North Star, and was good friends with Harriet. And apparently Harriet had went to his house on more than one occasion as a conductor, right? So we're talking about how there's this network of people, right? There's this whole interweaving friends network that were able to not only help abolish slavery. And what's beautiful about Frederick Douglass, too, is that he was one of the people that he actually had a very deep connection to Abraham Lincoln. As I'm studying, and actually during the war, went and talked to Abraham Lincoln and was encouraging him to abolish slavery. Was like, you've got to do this. And he took that in, Abraham Lincoln. So we're in history right now, right? We're looking at history, and this is good to know our history. I had a woman reach out to me recently who I've been on her podcast show, and she was maybe in her mid-60s. And she posted a newsletter about how everything that she was taught in school, she grew up in the South, was inaccurate. Like, she's like, I grew up with these statues that are coming down. These were people they told me were heroes. She had and she was waking up. So it's like, man, there's been a lot of fake news out there around who, like, these people were actually very cruel, but people don't know the history. So one of the beautiful things is, like, we're deep in this historical study right now, and I'm loving it for some reason. I don't know. It's knowledge is power. Not knowing who you're from and what side that there's so many people. And so we're going to start talking about some of these great abolitionists who helped with the Underground Railroad. Also, another famous African-American person that was a lot in the book, in the movie with Harriet, you saw him depicted, William Still. He was incredible. Also, he was born free African-American in New Jersey, but his mother had escaped slavery. So that was always very close to his heart, right? So he taught himself to read and write, and he started to work as a clerk for the Pennsylvania Society for the Abolition of Slavery. And so he became one of the most active members of the Underground Railroad. And he was depicted a lot in the movie with Harriet. That's kind of the guy who was like, okay, let me write your whole story. As soon as anyone escaped, he was like the historian record. Tell me everything that happened to you. And many of those stories are coming out now. Also, Sojourner Truth was a big activist. She wasn't involved directly in the Underground Railroad. What she was involved was helping slaves who had escaped settle in other places. So she was kind of like the next step after people got out of the slavery system and reached freedom wherever they landed. Then Sojourner Truth would take over. So all of these people are really great. So we want to talk about this, and also Arisika is going to talk about this too, but I want to just show you some of the stories, and you can look up these people on your own. And a couple of them, one died in helping, and these were people who were devoutly committed to Harriet Tubman and the whole journey, and were so horrified by slavery that they risked their lives, their whole life, to try to end it, and were actively helping enslaved people get out. So that was their main goal. They felt they could just take everybody out, okay? Get everybody out to freedom. But we know that there was, they passed the Fugitive Slave Act, in which made it even more dangerous. But that only made these people more committed, right? The Underground Railroad didn't stop for 65, 70 years. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the first one. Let's see, Janetti, if you can make it work, great. But I want to talk about Levi Coffin first. Levi was a Quaker abolitionist. And Levi is important because he was considered the president of the Underground Railroad. He was considered the president, the most powerful, because thousands of slaves passed through his particular stop. Thousands, they estimated. And he was involved in the UR stations in Indiana and Ohio, which was his home. He was also known as the Grand Central Station. So you might want to look him up a little bit, because he was the president, because he was willing to, thousands passed. He was a wealthy businessman. And this provided him with all of the funding, a lot of the funding for the Underground Railroad, right? And so I'm still understanding more about him. So even after the Emancipation Proclamation, so here you end the slavery, but many people, had no aid or anything. They were just like, goodbye off these, years of this abuse and enslavement. So he formed aid societies that would provide food, shelter, clothing, and education to freed slaves. So his particular story, and again, I'm giving you a quick overview, but we want to start studying some of these people because they were working with Harriet every day. Harriet and the whole Frederick Douglass and all of the freedom fighters. And so he was reported to just, have a huge heart. Okay, so let's go on. Janetti, we'll go to Thomas Garrett now. So Thomas Garrett, yes, he was quite, he was quite active. He was one of Harriet's closest friends because Harriet, particularly as a conductor, used his home many, many times personally. So there were many conductors, over the years. There were several conductors. Harriet Tubman being a famous one. But again, he was a Quaker abolitionist. We love the Quakers. The Quakers are, we gotta love, the Quakers were just so always fighting against slavery, enslavement. It wasn't for the Quakers. They really helped with the writing. They did enormous amounts of writing against slavery, and they turned the tide as like part of the consciousness against it. Right? So he was an abolitionist born in Pennsylvania. So he was living in Delaware, and he became the director of the Delaware Abolition Society. And to me, that means a lot because my father's people are from Delaware. If you go to Delaware, there's about 1,000 Washams. My brothers live there, my aunts live there, my fathers live there. So my people are from Delaware. So that's interesting. So his house was openly known to be the last stop on the underground Delaware side of the railroad. He defied authorities, but was never arrested. But he was fined several times, $4,500, which was an enormous amount of money back then, for helping a family escape. So he got caught once. And because he was probably very wealthy and he could pay this enormous fine, which was probably to the slave, the people who own them, or, there's a lot to know about this, so, and Harriet used his house as a station many times, and he provided her with funds to continue her missions. According to his own counts, according to his own biography, he was reportedly helped 2,700 slaves. So many people were keeping track. I mean, this is like really a bodhisattva, isn't it? Like I wanted to share these stories for a lot of reasons, and I'll explain more why, because it's important for people who are white to know your history too, of the great beings who stood up for what is truth, and for all of us to be united in this movement. Okay, so let's go to William Lloyd Garrison, who was very influential. Yes, okay, William Lloyd Garrison. He's the one that was very influential in helping Frederick Douglass get his story out. He was probably one of the most active activists out there. Okay, so he was born in 1805. He died in 1879. He was the founder and the editor of the abolitionist newspaper, the most famous one called The Liberator. Isn't that a great title? The Liberator. It's like Dharma, right? Like, we're going to liberate. And The Liberator was notorious. It became, it was like Black Lives Matter newspaper, right? Like, if you had a title, it's just The Liberator, it's historical. So I encourage you to look that up, because he was the founder and he was writing in it. He also was the founder of the American Anti-Slavery Society. So he spent years, his whole life, writing, teaching against this, right? And so he was able to use his education and his wealth, his whole life dedicated to this. Garrison required the total abolition of slavery and did not agree with the vision of gradual abolition. So he wanted total, complete liberator. Obviously, the Liberator was radical. I mean, they have old clippings of it. I mean, it's brilliant to look at some of this stuff. Is exactly what's being written right now. History is repeating itself, everybody. Okay, so Garrison was a mentor to Frederick Douglass, who after 8 years, actually, Frederick Douglass, according to William Lloyd, wasn't radical enough. They actually had a fight because he was advocating for even more radical views than Frederick Douglass. He was like, liberation now. And I guess Frederick Douglass wasn't quite ready for that level. And so after 8 years, they worked together. They had a little bit of a breakup, over he wanted to be more radical. Here's what's also interesting about Garrison. He was arrested and imprisoned in Georgia and had continuous death threats his entire life. Okay, so he lived under it. Garrison they say that I don't know how true this is, but they say that Garrison is the one that started nicknaming Harriet Moses. So we don't know if that's 100% true. He was always supportive of her activities, providing funds, shelters to thousands of runaways. After the emancipation, he kept writing about civil rights for Blacks and women on the Independent and Boston Journal, as well as the Women's Journal. So he was not only a feminist, but he was anti-slavery, but he was also had strong feminist, ideology, which goes hand in hand, right? If you're going to say something is called the Liberator and write for it, you're looking at rights for every person. Okay, just a couple more, and then we're going to kind of switch it up a little bit. But I want you to know who these people are, because they're important. Okay, just two more. So John Brown. Okay, John Brown, I wanted to really tell this story. Yes, he was the most radical one, and he actually ended up getting hung, which he tried to lead a raid and just like arm a whole bunch of slaves and tried to just have a revolt. And that was called the Harper's Ferry Raid, which led to him getting executed and hung with other group of African American people that tried to overthrow that. He was a white abolitionist, and he believed that only armed insurrection was the only way to eradicate slavery. So I left him in here because next week we're going to have a lot of talks about violence and nonviolence, and where John might have went wrong a little bit. But I understand there's this thing of like, how do we respond? And it's a complicated issue. So he carried out what was called the Harper's Ferry Raid, which was unsuccessful. And it's in history books, right? He was friends with Harriet Tubman, and he always referred to her as Harriet General Tubman. She was the general. Tubman helped Brown even recruit. So here's where it gets a little complicated. She helped him recruit some men to participate in this takeover of the ferry raid. And Brown helped transport Underground Railroad slaves to safety and to settle in new homes. So he was very radical. Like, he was armed resurrection. And so I think it's just an interesting point to talk about him. And he ended up getting hung. And you can read a little bit more about that. Yeah, kind of sad. Okay, so let's go to Lucretia. And this looks so good, Janetti. These slides are great. Okay, so here we have a woman, and there are actually many women, but this woman was very interesting. Okay, this will be the last story, 1793 to 1880. Okay, so she was born in Massachusetts. She was a teacher who was very devoted to women's rights. So that's how she started, as someone who was very devoted to women's rights. When she found out that men were paid 3 times more than women, she became an activist. So we're still battling this, are we not? I mean, this woman was born in 1973. It's 2020. We're still having conversations about, man, takes a long time, doesn't it? Okay. So she became one of the ministers and helped found the biggest organization, which was the American Anti-Slavery Society, right? And several of these people were members of the American Anti-Slavery. So not only did she help to found it, she was a minister in it. So she was preaching about it. So I just thought she was pretty good. After the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, which happened because of the result of the work of the Underground Railroad. So Congress, so this is just how the government and Congress work. We're going to stop this, and we're going to reclaim all the slaves and bring them back. We're going to go to the North. We're going to get all of them. So when they passed the Fugitive Slave Act, she made her house a central station on the Underground Railroad. So she doubled down. Not only was she preaching, but she said, I'm going to make my house one of the main stops. So again, the Underground Railroad was made up primarily of white families. I think this is really interesting to know. So I think we'll stop there. I know we had one more, but I think we're just going to stop there for a moment, Jeanette, and we can take down these slides. And that was great. And I there's a lot of people, and those are some of the names that come up a lot. But it's just so interesting because we're all in this together. And when I was looking at all the protests, you were seeing so many people, right? White, Black, Asian, Mexican, but a lot of the movement right now is also with people who are not people of color, right? And how do we start working together? And also for people who are white is to understand that so much shame and blame is like, oh, my ancestors. Well, these are your ancestors too. People who fought and helped to end it are also all of our ancestors. So again, the Harriet Tubman class is a different kind of class. This isn't meant to be like shame and blame. It's so many people are really liking this class and how I talk about healing because it offers a different perspective, right? This is about embodying Who are those people? They're some of the greatest Underground Railroad conductors, right? And so that's what we're embodying right now. Like, can we find that kind of courage? You know, and there's many people on the people who are African American that helped too, many, that it was a collective effort. But without these main people funding the movement in the forefront of the movement, and to me, the anti-slavery society reminds me of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's like, right? I mean, we're being pitted against each other right now. History is repeating itself. History is repeating itself. Now, if a white person stands up for Black Lives Matter, what happens? They get a backlash sometimes from their white community who are racist, right? But don't worry about that. We must find strength. We got to stand up to this. This is our world. These are our children. What is the legacy? And I believe that these abolitionists, all of them, their histories are going to start coming out. I wouldn't be surprised if movies were starting to be made about some of these people. Those that died in the battlefield with enslaved people, those that died on behalf of slave people. This is just a snippet, but there has been thousands of more here. The Underground Railroad is made up of a collection of people, liberators, right, on every side. So that feels really, really important to just say that, okay, to teach that. You have to learn that. And for all the people that are Black and brown, may this be a healing, that we know that there's people on the side, or, you know, the truth, on the side of justice. And that can help heal the hearts that feel very hurt. I started to think, and then in a moment we're going to move on, I started to think about how Harriet would deal with that. So here's Harriet, brutalized, enslaved, and then goes to the North, escapes, right? And then she has all these friends that are now white helping her. There must have been mind adjustments happening inside of her. Like, I forgive you. Okay, I'm a little scared. Are you really going to be there? Are you really going to show up? Are you really going to save people? So we also have to go through that, like trusting one another. Like, are you really going to stand up? Are you really going to be there? You know? And so I can only imagine the complexity that Harriet Tubman had to experience moving to the North, and her best friends, some of her dearest friends, being these white male, you know, like, wow, what a mind trip, you know, having not seen anything like that, only been brutalized. So we're all trying to reconcile. These are complex issues I'm bringing up in this class, everybody. They're for all of us to hold and to sort through and to look at deeply. And I don't have all the answers, but somehow it felt very important for us to talk about abolitionists and the allies. And I'm so excited because Arisika is also going to give a little talk, or a beautiful talk, our professor, and talk about that. But maybe what we should do is just, because that's a lot. And I remember last week people said, okay, take a breath. So let's take a breath, like, oh, this is a lot of information, right? And so Ashley said, let's take a breath, please, help. It's too much. It's like a lot of information coming and a lot of stories, you know? And yeah, and many of these abolitionists were also jailed for a period, but they had wealth so they could get out of that system. So they all at different times went to jail or were harassed, you know? So we just take a breath and we give thanks to those ancestors. We give thanks to Frederick Douglass. We give thanks for all those writing about the truth. We give thanks for all those people who open their homes on the journey. We open our hearts to learning. All right, so I think Jeanette had a song. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little movement now. So the time to walk. Give me an amen. Put your hands up. Should we do a little? So I'm going to play a song where we're going to walk. And then Arisika is going to lead us in a movement, a really guided movement walking. Okay? And so I'm so excited about that. And so after we play the song, stay walking if you can. And then Arisika, are you out there? I saw you. Maybe you can unmute yourself and say hi. There you are. Yes.
Good morning, everybody. It's a good day to be here, and it's a good day to be talking about allyship.
Yes. Thank you. So after we play, we're going to play just a walking. We're going to let it go, take a breath. And then Arisika is going to guide us in some more movement. And then I'm so excited to add your wisdom to this whole title, this whole topic of allyship and how to be there. So thank you. So, all right. Yes. Okay.
Feel your feet in this moment, or your sits bones, or whatever part of you is closest to the earth. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Every one of us comes from people who were indigenous to the land. And in this moment, I want us to just acknowledge, whether you know their names or not, the indigenous people of the land that you are standing, sitting, walking, and living on. I want to pour libation for the Chochenyo Ohlone. Never recognized as a federal tribe, never federally recognized. And I want to say that in this talk of allyship, in this moment, we are called to address complexity. We are called to acknowledge our ancestors. And not just, as Free is talking about, the good ancestors, but to also recognize that every one of us comes from people who have done good and bad. My African ancestors sold others of my African ancestors into slavery. We must remember that. The Buffalo Soldiers, who are so remembered and honored by African Americans, participated in wars against the indigenous people. If you are European, you know the history of imperialism and colonialism that was carried out by Europe, so that in the mid-1800s, Europe, and I even think England, made claim to 85% of the world. As we move into allyship and as we claim our freedom-fighting ancestors, and all of us have them, we also need to acknowledge those others. And that those others, the work we do today, redeems the lives of our ancestors who were small and petty and chose greed, hatred, and delusion over the truth of liberation. So, because I know that every one of us has ancestors who died in crimes against humanity, I want us to again begin this walk, but begin it by imagining that we're walking in Harriet's shoes or in the footprints and the path formed by your own ancestors. So take a breath in and feel the earth. This is a moment that we are honoring Harriet and the African American struggle. This is a moment when all of us are united in saying Black Lives Matter. And it is also a moment that calls us to recognize our intersectionality. So, your people may have survived the Armenian genocide, the pogroms in Russia, the Boudica fighting to preserve her land after the rape of her daughters by the Romans. We all come from a lineage of people who struggle against war, for peace, and for liberation and freedom. And the narrative in the last 15, 20 years has so often been to emphasize the white allies over the Black people. So a movie comes out about Biko, and suddenly there's this reporter, this white reporter who's trying to get the story out, and the threat to his family, and less on the story of Biko. So I wanted to imagine that we're walking on this path for freedom. If you cannot move, you can lift your hands if your hands are amenable. If you cannot move your hands, imagine, because the parts of our brain light up regardless. Take a step we're stepping back and back and back. Far ahead of us, following that North Star, is Harriet. And we, some of us are walking with her. We are pushing aside the brush. We are standing and drinking muddy water. We are blessing the water that hides us. We are running and walking and sleeping and praying and keeping on when it is so hard to have faith. And those of you who are not Black, imagine that you are walking. Perhaps you have ancestors who walked the Trail of Tears, the forced marches in the Philippines, the killing fields of Cambodia. You are walking. You are fleeing war and genocide. The partition of India, where so many died. The victims of the caste system. The wars in China as it became an empire and killed millions of its people. The Australians and the Indigenous. Aotearoa and the Indigenous. Just imagine some of your ancestors who are fleeing genocide, fleeing the burning times. Everybody wants to be free. We don't need anybody to tell us this. It is innate in our knowing. So kinfolk, we're following Harriet, but we're walking in tandem with our ancestors. We're walking with the Irish, some of whom came because they emptied the prisons. We're walking with the Armenians. We're walking with the Palestinians. We are walking. We are fleeing war. We are carrying our babies in our arms and our elders on our back. Walk. We know this road that Harriet is going on because our people have traveled it. Walk in the shoes of your ancestors. Walk, fleeing the wars. Japan, Korea, so much death. Slavic people whose enslavement was so great that their name came into the language as synonymous with slavery. Sami people, one of the few indigenous peoples left in Europe. Take a walk. Feel the rocky ground that we must walk to get away. Feel our connections to the forest. Embrace the tree. Hide in its shelter. Hold it for a moment. Ask for strength from the trees. Ask for strength from the ground. Feel the coldness of the water that you are running through. Feel the muddiness of the swamp ground. Sometimes, kinfolk, we are running. Our feet are bruised and bleeding, and we are running because behind us lies death. Behind us lies rape. Behind us lies the horror of being enslaved or killed at someone else's whim. That's what slavery is. To be killed or maimed or tortured without any legal recourse. Every one of us has freedom fighters in our lineage. You are called to remember that. And they are walking a parallel path with Harriet. She's taking our enslaved African ancestors and your ancestors who fled, who fought for freedom. You're walking with her. The trees and nature, places to hide, caves, rocky shelters, the earth is supporting you. Let's be the breath underneath each other's wings. This liberating breath, blow it out. This liberating breath, blow it out, blow it forward, blow it out. Take your hand and press against the chains, the delusions, the ignorance that keeps us apart, that keeps anti-Black racism and white supremacy alive, the piece that keeps women down, the piece that oppressed your ancestors, European or not. We are chopping down this tree. It does not need to grow anymore. We are making a new path, an intersectional path that holds all of us. We are stomping out oppression. We are stomping out oppression. We are stomping out oppression. And we're breathing into the heart. We are breathing in the sweet nectar of liberation. We are not there yet, but that is where we are going. We are going when all of ourselves are same gender loving, our diverse sexual orientations, our elders, our youth, our able-bodied and disabled. We are going forward into a future that holds us all. Take a breath. What are your stories? We are talking about Harriet's story. Hand to heart, pause, hand to belly. Do you know the stories of your ancestors? The times they broke the original agreements, the times they were freedom fighters. Our loving is not enough. Our elevation of one perfect leader is not enough. This is the time that we must be the leaders we were looking for. If the next Buddha is the Sangha, what are you doing with your life? You can take a seat. What are you doing to look at both the missteps of your ancestors and the trailblazing path? Today, there is an article, a full page, I want to call it cartoon, but a drawing story by, I think, a Korean woman in which she acknowledges that in the midst of anti-Chinese, anti-Asian racism, which never goes away, just, pops up, drives people out, pops up again, that she read on an Instagram post about the killing in 1991, the killing of Letitia Harlan by a Korean grocery store owner. And that woman who was ignorant, who shot out of fear and ignorance and killed his teen, was sentenced by the jury to 10 years. And the judge commuted this sentence, $500 and 400 hours of community service. And what the writer says, the writer is Laura Park, is she says, she's examining her own privilege as an Asian woman, or as an Asian person. And she says, I've learned to wear a mask, wash my hands, and isolate to keep myself and others safe. But I can do my part in other public health crises. And the crisis of racism, the crisis of homophobia, the crisis of everything that oppresses us, that calls us as anything less than children of spirit. That's what we're fighting against. And she says, I know for these other crises, I can give more than 400 hours and $500. Certainly if Black Lives Matter, that is not the worth of a Black life. And I say this because I am calling you to be fearless. Deepa Ma says, the daughters of the Buddha are fearless. And in the patriarchal society, she said, anything a man can do, I can do. Totally clear. Look at your history. Be strong enough to look at those slave-owning ancestors. Don't run from them. They were there. It happened. What are you doing in your life that recognizes, offers reparations for what was done in the past? Every one of us is called on to do this because all of our tribes, Cherokees had slaves, for example. Not all of them, but some of them did. So what are we doing to examine our past? We can't leap over it. We can't just examine, offer a hand of friendship now. We need to examine our history, know who we are, take action, whether that action is prayer, whether that action is activism, whether that action is love. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for taking us on that journey. Amen. Hallelujah. Because that's what we have to do. We have to forgive all of the madness, the greed, the hatred, and the delusion that's gone on for cycles and cycles and cycles. So thank you, Arisika. I was feeling it, cutting through, chopping the trees of delusion down. Thank you. I just appreciate you so much. So maybe what we can do, Ariska and I can both answer some questions here. People seem to really like having opportunities to share. I really like to invite those, who would like to speak and share a little bit or ask a question. It could be toward Arisika, it could be toward myself. Maybe we can go back and forth. It was really nice hearing from people last week. Really encourage those brown voices to come through and whatever you feel inspired to talk about this healing and the allyship. Okay, Sandy Gordon, I see your hand. Do you want to unmute yourself? And then you could go ahead and either comment or ask a question.
Yes, and thank you, Spring, and thank you for everything. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate this class so far. So I have a question. I wrote it down. So I put, in my experience, often approaching these issues through love has been ridiculed. It's been seen as too soft and naive. How can we better understand love can also be a radical act? Or what does love in this context mean to you?
Well, I'll just say a little bit, and then Ariska, I would love to hear what you have to say on this. This is exactly what we're going to explore a lot of next week, is this nonviolence, violence, bodhisattva. I want to tell you that there is this sutra in the Pali Canon, which is the whole collection of the Buddhist teachings, where he was reporting to have been in a past life on a great boat. And on the boat, there was about 500 sailors sailing somewhere. And in his meditation or his awareness, he saw that one of the sailors was going to try to sink the boat. And so he killed him. And he did it, they said, without any hurt in his heart, but that was like the only thing that he could do to stop, to save these other lives. And so I don't know what the complexity of all of this, it's like, I think all of us, we start off with the approach, for me, nonviolence movements work because we don't want to sow the seeds that we're fighting against. So for me, that's logical. And, when I think about this man who died, John Brown, who tried to lead this ferry raid, and Harriet helped him, right? And he was going to try to liberate all these slaves at the same time. And then he ended up dying. It's so hard to know. So this is a question I'm going to be chewing on all week. And I think this needs to be our homework question, and that we come back next week looking at the archetype of the bodhisattva from the Buddhist tradition, those who are willing to go into hell for a heavenly cause. Sometimes I think there is a loss of life, but obviously there's the protect life is the whole goal. And so this is just one of those questions that we're going to have to figure out for ourselves, but we do want to be thinking of ourselves as nonviolent, that we're not perpetuating that which we want to eradicate, that becomes the danger. You start engaging, you know, and so I don't know. I would love to hear your.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay. So, you know, I think that we act as we are called to act. And so for me, one of the only book I've read by Ram Dass is Grist for the Mill. But what I took from that is that everyone has a path of heart. And for some of us, this path is in the intellect, it's in the mind, it's the study of students, it's going into the monastery. For some of us, that path is in the heart, it is in service, it is love, it is in generosity. For some of us, that path of heart are the mindful meditations, the movement of Qigong or yoga or Aikido. Everyone has a path they are called for. And there's an African-American spiritual that says there are 12 gates to the city. And you can say that's 12 astrological types. Love is deeply important. It is not enough. We need to know. Some of the people who were abolitionists were willing to risk their lives for enslaved people, but they wanted to send them back to Africa. They didn't believe they could fully integrate. And while they wanted to extend a helping hand to the African, if that African was not Christian, there was a problem. So we have to know where our leaders have fallen down. We have to know what positive things we take from them. What are you called to do? Somebody has to heal the wounded. Somebody has to make the food. You know, I remember 50 years ago, an older Black man who was a military vet saying, Arizika, people are talking about revolution. They haven't seen the stockpiles of guns. Who's going to be the hospital? Who's going, some of us need to parent the children. Some people stayed in slavery because they were caring for their beloveds and they didn't want to leave them. And even if it was horrible, they committed to every drop of love. So if your way is sweet medicine, sweet water, cooling, choose that unabashedly. You don't have to, every one of us is a pioneer and a leader in some way.
Oh, beautiful. Yes, we're all learning how to be conductors. Some of you are going to be the cooks and making amazing soul food and beans and rice and feeding people. And that's brilliant. Somebody needs to do that. Exactly. And so there's so many ways to be conducting right now. And so I love that. And there was a guy who was down there in Kentucky. What's that chef's name who was standing out there all day with those Black voters in Kentucky, making food for people? I just loved it. I forget his name, Jose. He was like, he cooks he does these humanitarian things. So as they have one voting booth for all of Kentucky, the biggest African-American area, they were hot and tired and standing outside in lines that were so long. So here's this amazing food truck pulls up and it's like free food. And he's just cooking soul food for all these people. That was so revolutionary. I cried. I saw that tweeted on Twitter and then I looked and he goes all around with his food, making food. And it's so touching from Puerto Rico, all around the world. He's like, yeah. I need to look up his name next week. Okay, so I saw a hand
Jose
up.
Andres.
Okay,
Jose Andre.
Oh, Jose Andre, yes. Yeah. I just something about him out there in Kentucky. It was all African American voters trying to cast their vote. Again, being oppressed. Voter registration is under voter rights is being oppressed. We have to stand up for that, and he did in his way. So thank you. Okay, so Hopi Washam, my sister, has raised her hand. Okay, Hope, unmute yourself and go for it.
Hi, thank you. So my question is, for those of you who don't know, I'm Spring's sister, Hope. I'm a licensed practitioner at East Bay Church of Religious Science. I speak we do a lot of political activism and social activism in my community, and I support, Black, white, Chicano, everybody. comes through our doors. And I have a lot of conversations with our white constituents, my friends, my colleagues, my allies. And one of the things that I'm always noticing when I'm having race conversations with my white friends and allies and associates is a lot of guilt and shame. And I want to support people. So my question is for you, Spring, Ariska, and for everyone else who has some insight and wants to kind of chime in on this, is how do we as people of color have these conversations, these difficult conversations with white people, where we can support them in moving past the guilt and the shame? Because I notice either two reactions. Either people will engage in the conversation with me, they'll breathe, there'll be guilt, there'll be shame, and they'll just sort of power through it, the conversation, as their stuff is coming up. And then there's this other group that I see, and I think we see this a lot in our society, where people know that the history of what's happened in our country is shameful. They know it's wrong. There's a sense of helplessness, and this sense of hopelessness that they feel. And because it's so painful and there's so much heat around all of this, that they go into avoidance and they go into denial, and they say, well, that's an unfortunate part of history. That's their experience. That's not my experience. I can't do anything about that. And there's this disassociation from the pain and shame, of course, not recognizing that they're part of it. So my question is, how do we as people of color share our experience and have these honest dialogues and this conversation and promote healing rather than reinforcing guilt and shame? Or, given that we're not responsible for other people's experiences or their emotions, how do we have these conversations and support people and continuing the conversation and not distancing themselves and promote healing?
Yeah.
I'm always looking at how I can do this in my conversations with people. And I'm just curious, what are you all experiencing? How are you navigating through this? Because I'm not just finding this with older people. I'm finding this with white millennials. I'm having this dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you, Hopi. Well, I could just share, because I've had a lot of these really powerful podcast interviews lately where a lot of them are talking about race in America. And one of the things that I think happens as I think white allies, they kind of come into awakening around this. I think there's two aspects that happen. One is that some people go to guilt and shame, as you mentioned, they kind of curl up like, no. I think that hopefully that's a stage. And I think a lot of it also has to do with real feelings of regret. You know how we've done something unconsciously and it's harmed someone? And then later we're sitting in meditation or we're in prayer and we're like, oh no. Like there is a sense of like we have our karma, unconscious behavior is dangerous for us and them. We're hurting ourselves, right? And so there has to be, I always think there's a stage where as we start to wake up to ourselves that we have to reconcile all the things that was done and said where we were unconscious. There is actually some healing. That is sort of a karmic, that is a cycle. And I think one of the places that can really help people do that is in these groups where white people are getting together. White Awake, it's almost like AA, white support groups, where you can tell what happened, what you're conditioning, the stories of maybe what your father said, how you grew up with the N-word spoken around you every day, right? There's a place where I really think these groups for white people to get together are very healthy, where they can start to unpack what has been done and to start to heal it. Right? To start to let go of all the stories of what have happened. And also knowing a lot of this is programmed. the culture, the church, the preacher said, my grandfather said, my uncle went to this, it's like, so we can tell those stories in a way that we don't feel ashamed. I think one of the things is being around white people together and telling their truth is far less shameful than when there's a person of color there. Because sometimes they use, I think, those moments as like a preacher would, or a priest, like, I have now absolved you, and we can't do that. People sometimes want me to do that as a teacher. Like they want to tell me all the things that happen. I'm like, well, I don't know if I can quite hold this, but here's a support group where they can really hold it. And there's no shame. Everybody's unpacking the same thing. It's just pain and conditioning. So when that happens, I would encourage people, if they're interested, to reach out to one of those groups. And there are so many forming. Inside LA has a White Awakening. East Bay Meditation Center has a White Awakening course. Really, people are loving it. Okay, so that's one level. The other level is that people tend to get so angry that they become like the woke police. So they go around and they're just like hitting everyone in the head. Well, wake up, and then that I get where it's coming from, but you got to understand, we want to get people in the heart. If you just walk around with your baseball bat of wokeness history, they're just running from it, and some people can absorb some because they care, but you're getting whacked at the same time. And I think that's a stage. So if you do become a woke person on these issues, make sure you're not banging everyone in the head and hitting them over and over with it. This is a heart. This has to come through here, cortisone. You can't beat someone into understanding this. You can't even legislate it. We have to, unfortunately, to protect human rights, but we'll just create another unjust system. Right? We'll tear this one down and create another one because the heart has to be in it. So Hopi, that would be my thoughts, is to tell people to work this out in groups of loving, compassionate white people that are designed to hold it. Even great facilitators that are anti-racist. The best ones are not there to shame and blame people. They're there to explore the program. That's all they're meant to do. They're not meant to, hit you in the head for hours. It's like a support group to take the program apart skillfully. And you got to tell your stories, everybody. We've all done stuff unconsciously and consciously. We got to stand up and say, all right, these are what I've done. I purified them. I confess them. I heal them. I move. And we all have to do that. That is called healing karma. So I don't know if that totally answers your question. Arisika, you might have something to add on to that.
There's very little. You've been really clear. I think the takeaway is it's really important that any privileged group, whether it's an able-bodied person, whether it's a white person in terms of racism, whether it's a queer person, whether it's someone who's straight versus someone who's queer, do not take your first hints of hearing the story and being overwhelmed, whether it's shame or guilt or trauma, to the targeted group. The boot is still on our neck. Don't ask us to comfort you. Don't ask us to hear your use of the N-word 10 times because that's what your father, mother, auntie, whatever did. There are people working on this issue. And I do want to say that Ricky Shirova-Marcusa, who's now dead, did a lot of work. I think she coined in the 80s, I think she coined the term unlearning racism. She came out of peer counseling. And when she worked with white people, she'd often ask them to go to the first story of when they were told to become white and disavow their friendship with a child of color, their love for the person of color who worked in their house, and that every white person remembered some story where they were asked to deny their common humanity, the interdependence that the Buddha talks about, the loving kindness that arises naturally. Those stories need to be heard and grieved and wept and be hit the pillow for in groups of other white people who connect with that story and can hear it without being re-traumatized. Tell the story. Make ritual. I have stepped away from a friendship with a white woman who very much supported me for decades because her family owned slaves in Baltimore, where my family comes from. And I've asked her to do ritual with me. If you are asked to do ritual or prayer by a person of color, bring your whole story. Own what was done by some of your ancestors. Don't try and leapfrog over to the present. That's not real. We need to heal this wound spiritually. We need to heal it materially. We need to heal it institutionally, in every way possible. But those first steps when we're learning, and you talked about spring that self-righteousness. You're wrong. This is what. Don't bop people over the head. Figure out ways to sit with your own family at dinner without shaming and blaming and opening a heart so they might change.
Yeah. And this is what this class is about today, is allyship. So we're giving some good advice here with these questions, right? We're trying to help you just get more tools and to understand how to navigate, And so thank you. Yes, if you're asked to participate in any energetic ritual around healing racism, just go with your whole heart, because we're going to heal this on the mental level, the physical level, the emotional level, and the energetic level. 4 levels it has to heal on. This wound goes right to the core, And so we're all healing on these levels. So anything that you can do, prayers, and to be fearless, everybody. I was on a call the other day and this guy said to me, he said, but I'm so scared of black rage. And I was like, I'm so scared of white rage. Are you kidding? What's going on? And he was like, oh, right. It was just even in that conversation, a game changer. Have you seen the police? Have you seen the Klan running around? I mean, I'm scared of white men rage. And we both looked at the paradigm. It was just funny. It was like, oh, right. You're right. So we're all waking up, to how to heal these issues together. But ally means we work together. And we have to do our work together. We work individually with your groups, with the deep healing work around the program. And then we come back in and we do the other layers of equality work together. We learn how to stand up for each other. So these are really important. And there's so many groups. I will send out a resource guide to all the White Awakening, all the allyship classes, okay? And just dive on. My friends are telling me that are teaching them, they're like, whoa, they're so good, because there's a movement right now. And so you can find comfort there. Take refuge also in those places where you can tell your story. Yeah. So, okay, so do we have another question? Is this good for everybody? Raise your hand if this is okay, good. This is Harriet's school. I'm sure she had to do a lot of work around this, internally. I can only imagine. And Frederick Douglass too, So anyone who wants to make a comment? Is Miss Susan Burton on the line? Where are you, Miss Burton? Maybe she had to take a day off. She did have a workshop, but just want to open it up for anyone who has.
I'm here and I'm listening. Good work. Yeah, it's good work. A lot of information today, so it's all good.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just checking on you. Okay, so we have 4 participants have raised hands. I'm trying to see them. Hands, where are they? Okay. So let's go to Basabe Luna. Basabe. Yes. I see your hand. You want to?
Hi,
Hi, honey.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. My question is around having conversations with family, because as you said, I'm the woke police in my family. And so I'm that person that's like beating everybody over the head. And for me, it's really easy when people say certain things that are outrageous on social media to just like unfriend and unfollow. But you can't quite do that with family. So that's the question, is like, how do we have these conversations around family? Recently, I was talking to family about, we were watching the Rodney King documentary. So we had conversations around that. And, my thing is, my sister just had a baby, the first, grandchild in the family. And I'm like, we're starting to raise a new generation of humans. And I certainly don't want to be having the same, conversation with our kids 20 years from now. So it's like, how do we start to heal that within our own families?
Yeah, so I think this is an excellent question that we'll end on, because I really do think we have to do a lot of praying for our family trees here. When I'm in the shamanic realms, I always see this vast interconnectedness. And I think this is why it's so easy for me to kind of have conversations with people from a place of interconnectedness, because of all the years of shamanic work where I've seen that I'm in cell in the trees. I'm with, so first I have this deep sense of when I'm talking to someone that is like, okay, I'm talking to some aspect of myself. This really actually helps me. Like, they're in consciousness. Here they appear as separate, maybe they appear as a Trump supporter. And I had this conversation recently with someone in my own family that I grew up with. He was a stepbrother. My mother was in relationship with his father, and we lived together for 6-7 years as I was growing up. Now he's a diehard Trump supporter. And I wrote him this email: "You made my blue bike. I love that blue bike. You had painted sparklies on it, and I flew all around with my best friend Angela on the steering wheel, on the what do you call it? Steering handlebars." And I said, "You better remember who you are, right? And you used to take me to get sundaes. That's me, Georgie. That's Black Lives Matter," and it was like more just like, and something awoke in him, and we haven't been able to talk since Trump got elected. And Hope knows the story. I've kind of battled online with them and like, no, and something made me click and write to him and write down all the stories about his father teaching in a Black school, his father wanting to adopt me, who did adopt me at some point later, him making my bike. It was just like, I just did it through the heart. And so, Basabe, this question has been tearing families apart since 2016. As soon as Trump, not before that, 2015, families breaking up over this. And we got to see that we're interconnected, no matter how crazy the ideology seems on the surface. We got to find that commonality. And it may be that we can't at certain moments, and we need to step back, because we also have to protect our energy. But if we can find, like for him, Georgie, who's a Trump supporter, I can find the memory of that blue bike. And he, I'm sure as soon as I wrote the email, he saw me flying around with my best friend, screaming for hours on my bike, and being so happy that it's like, that's me, Georgie. Right? I am a Black person. And it's like you get it. It's like a different angle, guys. The woke police, people run. They're reacting like the police now, like defund the woke police, because it works, but only on one level. So it has to be the heart, Basabe. You've got to find a memory with these people in your life where it was joy and food and cooking and dancing and old times. And then you got to say, that's me. That's Black Lives Matter, I know you love me. Why, we have these blocks. The ideology will only get transformed in the heart chakra. I don't believe the program can be uprooted any other way. It's too deep and too fiery right now. It has to be your body. So we have to find these ways, and it's rocky. I have no answer. I can say, do compassion, Basabe, do prayer, but this is hard. I don't know. I'm figuring it out. But it helped when I found this memory with Georgie, this young man that is a diehard Trumper and very religious. He cracked. He said, thank you, you're helping me. And that was a breakthrough. So know right now, the possibilities of miracles are happening. There's miracles happening with people who did not see these issues, and slowly they're seeing them. So let's not give up faith, but it has to come through the heart now. If there's a crack there, don't drive a baseball bat through it, right? We want to open up, let the sun shine in, right? Because it's a scary shift for people. So I'm with you, honey. I know we come from, both of us, biracial families. So I know. I have a, white part of my family. My mother's white, and she's not woke either all the way, and it's hard. I'm like, okay, here we go. Step one. Do you know your daughter's Black? Your 2 daughter, it's like, and I just laugh and I just do it with heart, it's like, okay, we're healers, not beater uppers, So, yeah.
And I just want to echo that Spring is saying, you take the time that you need, and you understand change doesn't come in a day, and you have faith that everybody can grow and change. I met people who were diehard segregationists who led the civil rights movement. They changed. Sometimes it's what we say that wakes them up. Sometimes it's grace of spirit that wakes them up. We don't know. So just hold on. You don't stop who you are and what you're doing because, what is it? Loss and gain, praise and blame. I mean, we keep going in spite of. And if we love people, there's a beautiful story that an Asian American woman told me about the coming out process. They had worked on the idea that for many Asian people, coming out to their parents was more important even than physical safety for some people. And what this woman said is that you don't have to come out loud and proud, but she said, if you take the time that you need, she said, 15 years later, her mother sewed both of their wedding dresses. So we don't know how long it will take. We just are the steady water carrying the stream of truth. We are the steady water pouring against the rock. We are the steady water of the stream of change.
Oh, yes, the stream. The steady stream. I love that. And so let's, and I know there's so many questions out there. I'm sorry, everybody. We could try to start collecting them. But we're going to do our closing prayer here because we're almost out of class. Man, this class flies by. I always think, that's why we have 2 more Sundays. Yay. And next week, again, we're really going to be talking about the Bodhisattva, this vow of nonviolence. But what if someone pulls a gun on us? Well, are we nonviolent then? I mean, what about safety? What about if we're protecting children? What about we have a handful of people? Like, what does it mean? And I don't have the answers, but I think we're going to really explore this from the, Black Lives Matter movement, historical, and the Buddhist view of the Bodhisattva archetype. So next week's going to be juicy as we learn how to be freedom fighters. And again, just exploring these topics. So I want to give thanks to everyone, especially Arisika, Professor Dr. Arisika, thank you, who's a great professor. You can look up her website. She works at CIIS. She's a core teacher at the East Bay Meditation Center, leads all kinds of fantastic work. So please, your website, maybe we'll put it.
I don't, at this point in time, I don't have a website.
Right.
But
you
I
find her.
And I do have some dance pieces, and I do have some talks on the web, so you can find me. And thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
I just love it. Yeah, I just love it. Okay, everybody, so let's do our closing prayers. Just giving thanks for this time, giving thanks to this spirit of Harriet that is bringing us together and all the ancestors. Giving thanks to the ground that holds us. I give thanks to all you as I feel your hearts. I give thanks to Miss Jeanette Jaramillo, all the way in Ecuador, making this program happen. Give thanks to all your sweetness and your joy. I give thanks to gospel music and the songs of our people. I give thanks to Mother Earth and Father Sky for bearing witness to this long walk to freedom. I give thanks to the courage that is manifesting in us, to the hearts that are awakening through us. I give thanks for that. I give thanks for the Sangha. Together we thrive, together we grow. I give thanks that we are trying and are healing our family trees. And so I dedicate this particular class to the healing of our family trees. May our family trees be whole and well for humanity. You see, we are one family, each tree manifested perfectly. It's you and me, us together. We learning to see the wisdom to be. Stand up courageously. This poem is coming through spontaneously for you, bringing it out in me, family. Harriet Tubman style. Yeah, I see you, ancestors. I'll walk with ya. I'll be with ya. That's all they want. Love and light. And so it is. I dedicate all of this. Yay! Oh, Mani Padme Hum. Woo! Thank you, everybody. Next Sunday, same place, same time. Study the abolitionists. That's the homework. Janetti will send it out. Okay, everybody. Have a beautiful rest of your Sunday.
How beautiful we all are.
Yeah, say hi to everybody as we go out. Jazz hands, everybody.
Thank you.